happened that with you?
So what you're probably referring to is the fact that I had people in my family who had psychic gifts.
Yes,
right?
psychic gifts.
I believe that everyone has this. Some people just maybe come more naturally to it, or they're in environments where it's nurtured. You know, what is that? Nurturing versus nature, and so my grandmother, who I never met, she was, I was told, very psychic, and she read the playing cards daily. We don't know if she got this practice from Sweden or if she got it from San Francisco, but she did. And both my mother and my aunt are also very psychic. None of them were professional about it, nor did it enter into their religious beliefs. None of them were witches. So I became a witch by getting exposed to the craft and reading books, and then eventually receiving initiation and training. So although witches do believe in psychic abilities and we believe in magic, we are also a religion, and so we're drawing upon both this folk religion that comes from, I suppose, medieval ideas that have made their way into the 21st century, and the modern occult movement. So although we do practice the arts magical, we're also practicing the religions of our ancestors, tapping into the gods of nature, the goddess of nature. And I think in this day and age that's very relevant, that people are learning to take back their own power and also take back their relationship and the responsibility with nature and with the cosmos around us. We don't live in a vacuum. We live with all living things, and we are the custodians of this planet. And if we don't begin to take that job a bit more seriously, she might shake us off like fleas.
In the ancient times, I don't know how many hundred years ago, but in that time people don't have doctors, they don't have nurses. People went to the witch. They knew the herbs, they knew how to help the people with the herbs. In your book, there's a section about the herbs and what kind of healing abilities they have. But probably that is not enough. You need to have much more knowledge to know when, because the sun, because the stars, because the moon, probably they have different much more powerful powers in specific time of the day or the night.
Well, there was certainly a long-standing tradition with what we would call in the ancient world of priesthoods being healers, judges, doctors. Whether you go back to ancient Egypt, and for instance the priests and priestesses of Isis, people would go to them for healing because they were known to be healers, and they would often apply herbs or even medical procedures, but always alongside spells or incantations. So these things weren't separated. So witchcraft is very much like that today. Although we may use the natural world for remedies, magic is going to go into it as well. But we do have a saying in the craft: use your backbone before your wishbone. So really understanding the nature of the issue and how you can deal with it best. I love the story of move this book with your mind. And ask someone to move this book with their mind. Some people will try very hard.
Telekinesis.
Yes, they will put all their energy into moving it. They believe it's possible, and they're going to give it a shot. And then you simply do this. I've moved the book with my mind. Mm-hmm. So it would be a waste of power. It would be a vulgar display of power to spend that much psychic energy trying to move a book when you can just move the book. So if we've got natural remedies, or we have things that we can apply that are going to help a person, we're going to do that. So it's really about cause and effect in that sense. It's not about proving supernatural power. It's using all of the tools at our disposal to heal, to nurture, to protect. The witch's role in modern society has remained the same. It's just society's changed. We were feared for hundreds of thousands of years. We're still feared. You know, our country now is moving more and more into fascism and religions that do not support things like the way of the witch. You know, so we're still the outcasts on the fringe of society. A good friend of mine once said we were a priesthood in exile. So the craft is a mix of those folk beliefs and practices of our ancestors, modern occultists, and the rebirth of the religion of the goddess. So yes, we do use herbs, we use the natural world, we use the seasons and the phases of the moon in our practices.
I have a funny question for you. I had the same question to Lori. I see that you have a broom.
Yes.
Can you fly with broom?
No.
She said, let me tell you what she said. First of all, she was very serious. And then she said, yes, we can fly with broom.
Flying was really, it's more than one thing. So it's usually referring to astral projection, which is where you're flying. You don't need a broom, you know. And if you actually study witchcraft folklore, the broom really didn't originally always translate to needing to be, you know, we flew on goats, we flew on pitchforks, we flew with nothing at all, you know. So the association with the broom is usually believed to come from old fertility rites and as a symbol of domestication. You know, there were rituals where people would jump around with brooms or jump around with pitchforks to tell the crops how high to grow. That's the story that we have. The broom is more of a symbol for us now. Some people believe it was once the magical staff that was being disguised, you know, in the home, so you wouldn't know what it was, so they put a broom on it. And really, I think it has to do with domestication, and that we increasingly created that symbol of the witch as female, as an old crone, the typical Halloween witch. We put the hat on. These all come from older things. Yeah. But the broom was a way to say she was the average wife. She was the average woman in your household. You know, it was, in a sense, taking her power away from her, you know, because it was putting her in her place, you know. So she wasn't a high lady, was she? Because a high lady wouldn't have a broom. So it's symbolic of all of those things. We tend to use them very little.
So when we're talking about broom, we know for what reason we have a broom in the house, right? Mm-hmm. To clean.
Yes.
And your broom is in the correct position. Mm-hmm. Do you think that probably, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but do you think that also broom have some kind of part of this witchcraft to clean the bad things?
Well, yeah, because that's the old thing with magic, is we call it sympathetic magic, you know, so you're doing an action and then having the universe mimic that action. Mm-hmm. So we use a broom to clean, and it's still used for purification and protection and cleaning today. Mm-hmm. You know, most likely flying was originally accomplished by taking hallucinogenic plants. You know, so I don't think the broom originally had anything to do with that. But the story is that it was used in fertility rites, mm-hmm. or staves and poles were used in fertility rites, mm-hmm. to do this sort of thing. There's other lewd stories as to how it may have been used as well. Yeah. So when we put the broom upright, it's supposed to symbolize the female dominance. Because it symbolizes the, you know, I don't know what I can say on your show, but it symbolizes the female genitalia, yeah. in this way, yeah. Right?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay.
You can edit anything out I say that's inappropriate.
Okay. What about Merlin?
About Merlin? Oh, well, I mean, the Arthurian legends that we find in England and France certainly are inspiring. I think they inspired all of us as children. You know, I think Merlin probably references an old Celtic god and probably wasn't a person, but we don't really know. Interestingly enough, they just discovered a new book of Merlin. I don't know if you've heard about this. So, and I think it was through the French, which is where actually most people don't realize that's where the Arthurian legends really first bloomed. So interesting information. Was it a real person? Was it a god that became a mythos? I don't know, but certainly it's a magical story. It's a story that I think probably goes back to the Welsh Taliesin. The idea that you had this magical man that was half god, half human, or half demon, half fairy, or whatever it is, who's running amok within the world and affecting courses of change.
I mean,
the kingmakers.
people from ancient times, especially from Western Europe, like UK, there's a story about fairies. For example, Merlin, his mentor was a dragon. And so all these creatures, they're not mythical creatures, they are real. Maybe not in different from our physical perception or understanding for them, but they exist even today.
Well, I mean, definitely in the craft, we believe in a whole plethora of entities, right? So, I work with angels. I work with elemental beings. I work with fairies. I might have met a dragon or two in my time. These all exist on the inner planes or in the other worlds. And I like to say, like, magically speaking, if you look at how infinite our universe is, I think the spiritual world mirrors that. It is just as infinite. So as many solar systems and planets as we have, on the inner worlds, the other worlds, it's the same.
Maybe they're from another dimensions or multi-dimensions. So that's why for us looks like a myth, just some story, but they're real.
Well, I mean, it is very interesting how you look at the current alien phenomenon, which I know you discuss, and then like stories of fairies, there are some similarities. Do I necessarily think they're the same thing? I don't know, but it's the idea that there's a veil that things can pass through, and that we can interact with them, and we certainly do. We believe the natural world is alive. Everything has a spirit, and we believe in the astral plane, and we believe in other worlds. So yeah, now we might say dimensions, but it's a belief our ancestors had. It's not new. It's just the way we vocalize it now is different.
I have only that book. You can show up for.
Oh yes, this is my second book.
I have only this book, but I read it in different places just quickly to find out something about you. I found that you are very well educated.
Well, I mean,
you have a lot of information. In the end of the book, you have quotes from what kind of authors you use, what book you use. I mean, this is huge research. You're super real.
Well, this is my second book. My first book is Initiation to Witchcraft. I'll show you that before you leave. And then this is my second book, and they really kind of are complementary to each other. So this book was more about the religion of witchcraft and tapping a little bit more into its mythoses, whereas the first book was more about the function of the actual witchcraft priesthood. So I think that's something people quite don't understand. We're so exposed to the witches of TikTok, or all these different people being witches, that I don't think people realize that there is a high level of training for some individuals. Not everyone has that opportunity. That a Catholic priest does not receive better training than a witchcraft priest, given the opportunities, or priestess. So we spend years studying this. There was a old idea that the Druids, it took 20 years to become a Druid. Well, it takes that long.
So Druid is the 5th or 10th level?
No, Druid is just a English word for what we call the Celtic initiates. Like, that's a whole different subject.
Kind of level of the magic or the witchcraft?
It's more just Celtic oriented, right? So in the witchcraft is witch, and witchcraft is an English word, as you're aware of. So Druid is an English word as well, but it comes from older Gaelic words like dúr, which oak or door or whatever. This was the priesthood or the initiates of the Celtic world that we actually know very little about. So most of what was written about them was written by the Romans, who were systematically conquering and exterminating them while writing about them. But that is the record we have. And so they said Britain was the heart place of the training. So they said the Gaulish Druids, the ones with the best opportunities, got to go to Britain to train. That was where the main training was, if you were lucky enough, and it would take about 20 years to fully be trained. So that's what their enemies said about them. So I think that people don't realize that there are modern castes of orders and religions that people train and study years and years for, that have a lot of information to learn. So I'm a product of good training. Thank you for the compliment, but I'm a product of good training and studying.
Yeah. From 100 years in the back, the fifth element was the
Water witch is really just somebody who does the water divining with the sticks, but there's no such thing as a water witch. We use all of the elements in harmony. So one alone
That's why it's a circle.
Yes, one alone it would be out of balance. It would not be valuable by itself. You know, think about every element is equally as destructive as it is beneficial. Fire is the easiest example. You know, you can burn down this building, or you can protect yourself in nature from wild animals and cook your food in it. You know, it has all the destructive qualities and the natural qualities. So in order to harness it in a way that's going to be beneficial, it has to work with the other elements, because that's what creates life. You know, we have a necessity for air. We're basically made up of earth and water, you know, and we still can't really explain where the fire comes from.
Water.
Yes, like we do produce heat. That's something that science really doesn't quite fully understand, where that energy comes from. And it's spirit, you know, we have a soul.
Yeah.
Something ignites it all together. So without all the 5 elements, magically, there wouldn't be life. You know, you can't just have one.
When I met with Lori, I asked her, what is the magic exactly? She said, if you want to make a magic, you need to believe. If you don't believe, you cannot do anything.
Well, yeah,
So I make some connection between the Christianity
Yeah.
and the witchcraft. They have some similarity.
Sure.
I mean, in Christianity, for example, Jesus says, if you believe, if you have a faith, you can move that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the witchcraft. If you want to do, like especially for the protection, I asked for the witch. How was the name of this stick?
A wand?
Well, yes.
Yes.
I paid $190 because she blessed that, and I have certificate for this. And she said you can use it even if you don't have one. You can use your finger, extend, make a circle, like if you protect your bed, for example, and thinking about this and saying specific spell or words, because actually I think you said something about one of your videos, you talk about the power of the words. And this is vibration. I mean, you can create worlds if you have this consciousness and faith.
All religions, all gods, and all humans are related.
Yeah.
Right? I'd say the fundamental difference that we have between the arts magical, which just doesn't just belong in the realms of the witch. You know, there's magicians and voodoo priests and tons of magical traditions out there. But it's the main apparatus difference is that we believe we're involved in the process. So I believe that the divine, the goddess, the god, the gods, whatever you want to call it, gave us the abilities to navigate everything, you know, and so we're not praying in the sense that we're, you know, wishing the gods would help us. We're honoring the power, we're honoring the gods, and then it's up to us to do the work, you know. And so that would be the fundamental difference between how Christians operate and how witches operate. Now, interestingly enough, and I think we all know this, it's the old grandmas in the Christian church who usually get it. You know, you do have a few priests, you do have a few spiritual people that get it on accident, but you know, the old Catholic grandmas who go into the church and they're lighting the candles and they're saying their rosaries and they're just very devout, they are absolutely putting on a spell, you know. And I think in some way they know that, because through age and practice they know how they've achieved results. How they feel about it, you know, I agree with them on one thing. I don't think magic can work without the divine. I think God has to be involved. I had a fun story where I was doing a lecture and I was talking about the religion of witchcraft, and I'm an Alexandrian priest, a witchcraft priest, and this woman stood up and she said, well, she didn't think witchcraft was a religion. She thought it was a practice. And I was like, people do have that opinion. That's fine. That's not how we believe. And then she proceeded to ask me, she says, well, I do spells all the time and they never work. I said, maybe you need God. You know, because I do think you have to have that connection. I think you have to have that humility and that belief and that divine connection. I think if you think it's all about you, you're not going to have the harmony to create, you know, because we call it the arts magical. You know, some people will call it the science of art, and that comes from the old occult sciences, you know, but I prefer the term art magical because we're creating like artists. You know, it has to come from within, it has to be beautiful, and yes, you have to have belief in it, but a belief that also holds awe and beauty. You know, you have to believe in it the same way an artist believes in the canvas and the paint, and you just have to do it. You know, you can't overthink it. Can't be too scientific.
I see that you have a crystal ball.
Yes.
Do you need crystal ball to see in the future? Or?
Well, this actually is set up for seances. So here at Hex we have seance sessions with the psychics. So the crystal ball is just a great vehicle for channeling. And the reason why is because it's light.
Channeling with ghosts? Or?
Anything really. Because it's a sphere. It's a perfect sphere, perfect circle. Because the circle really is three-dimensional, right? And it's a vehicle of light. Light is constantly passing through it. And, you know, to quote Laurie Cabot, light carries information, you know, and we receive light in our pineal glands. And so it's a great tool. Could it just be a focal point? Sure, you know, but I think the reason crystals and crystal balls are so associated with certain entities, for instance, angels, it's because they're vehicles of light. So they're attracted to it, they understand it, and we can all work with it. So whether you think it's just a focal point tool to create the atmosphere, or whether you think the mechanics of it are valuable, witches, magicians, psychics have been using them for a very long time. So,
what kind? I don't know if that question will be stupid, but if you feel comfortable, you can answer or not. What kind super powerful things you can do?
Well, magic is really just about manifesting your will, right? So if you are with several witches and you can all will the same thing, you can manifest bigger things. So making a statement about, you know, what are the greatest things I could do? Well, that's difficult to say because they'd have to prove it, right? And we definitely aren't always miracle workers. We have worked miracles. We have healed people with cancer, you know. We've also failed at it, you know, because there's always fate. You know, there are some things you cannot fix. And one thing people don't know is that, at least in British witchcraft, Alexandrian Gardnerian witchcraft, we're not allowed to charge money. So any work we do for people is for free. We don't charge for training and we don't charge for money. You know, we can charge for a book we wrote because that's a service that we did. We can charge for our time, like during a tarot reading or things like that. But when it comes to our religious expressions, it's considered forbidden because it's a holy gift. Yeah. So it has to be freely given. So when I work magic, the number one thing is it's secret. I don't discuss it with people unless they're involved in it, because the more people you get involved in it, the less likely it's going to be under your control, right? I've seen quite some amazing things happen. I really have. I've had visual apparitions of lights. I have seen objects move. I'm not saying these were me that this occurred. Spirit manifestations. I've met my gods in person. You know, there are a lot of really powerful things that I've been involved with. I have not moved a mountain to my knowledge.
This is the bit.
If I have, I don't know about it.
Are you able to communicate with the people who die?
I can. I choose not to most of the time.
Okay.
Because I find people very boring, and I don't think death makes them more interesting. So in my opinion, unless they're intimately connected to you, like it's a loved one, you know, why do they want to talk to you? You know, there's something wrong. You know, the fun spirits, the good spirits, the developed spirits, they've moved on. They've gone to other realms, they've got work to do. So I find the only ones that really stick around that, you know, are entertaining are the ones that you have a personal relationship with, like your grandmother.
Yeah.
She might wait for you because in death, time really is irrelevant. You know, so sometimes family will stick around and wait and watch over.
Yeah.
That's a different matter. But when we're talking about the lost and the wandering, there's usually something off. And sometimes it can just be a manifestation of energy, you know, and it's not really that spirit, it's just an echo of them. There's a difference between these two, and I wouldn't say that I always know, but there is a difference. You know, I think the main way you could tell is an energy manifestation doesn't really overtly communicate, whereas it's not sentient because it's just an echo of what that is. A lot of hauntings will just be because there's energy collected in a place, and you usually will find water nearby, you know. But yes, I do believe in it. I can do it. I don't actively do it. Yeah.
And after this life, our consciousness still exists. Somebody says soul. Somebody says spirit. I say consciousness. I think consciousness just take all of these different ideas or subscriptions or something like this. And according to your knowledge, experience, where is going this consciousness? They waiting to be born again and then to just reincarnated according to the Eastern philosophy, that we have to, if we're not able to do what they're supposed to do in this life, so we have another chance in the next life. Well, what is your thoughts about this?
Well, in witchcraft, we do believe in other worlds, you know, but we also believe in reincarnation. We don't call it reincarnation. We do in books and things like that because people know what that means. It would just be called return or rebirth in the craft. And we know it's not just an Eastern mythology because the Romans wrote that the Druids believed in reincarnation, that they believed that they came back. They didn't call it reincarnation, of course. So I believe, nobody really fully knows. And I think any religion that claims to fully know something is selling you a bad bag of goods. But I do believe humanity has had experiences that collectively tell us a story. And I believe in reincarnation. I have had some experiences with reincarnation. I mostly philosophically believe in it. You know, when you go to sleep at night, you kind of die, you know, and
we die every night.
Yes, and sometimes you wake up and you remember nothing, and then sometimes you wake up and you lived in another world, or you've had all these experiences. So I think that that's teaching us what death is like. I think it's all around us with the rising and the setting sun, with you know how plants die and come back and all that sort of thing. But I think your consciousness, I do think, goes on, but I think it greatly changes because and I think this comes from Buddhism, really. That's the idea that the one is the ocean and your life is a drop of water, and when you return to it, it just doesn't seem that important. You could take this to a next level. Let's just say you were reincarnated 5 times. Let's say that's it. You've only been reincarnated 5 times. Once you die, it's going to be 6. And then all those lives become one thing, so they all become less important. Now take that idea and make it all of humanity, you know. So I don't think that the chapter of our life is going to extinguish. I don't think Brian doesn't matter, but I think Brian's going to matter a lot less to me when I return to all the things that I have been, right? So I think people are scared of losing their consciousness. And so I prefer to think of it as expanding your consciousness. You become just less important to yourself, you know. Think about that relationship that you had 20 years ago that may have meant so much to you then and now means nothing to you, or for you 2 years ago. You know, it means nothing to you now, you know, or very little to you now. Like at that time, that person seemed like they were the most important thing in the universe, and now you're like, what was I thinking? Yeah. You know, I think it's going to be a bit like that. I don't think it's going to bother us at all.
And lately, what can be your message or your wish to Auditori?
My biggest work in the craft, I think the craft's biggest contribution to society is that we're the first religion in the West to bring back the divine feminine in thousands of years. We're the first traditions in the West to restore the priestess in Western culture. Obviously the Hindus, they're a million miles ahead of us, right? But, you know, in the West, we were the first heralds of that, and we really remain that custodian of that today. And I think people think that witchcraft is all just about magic. And for me, I think magic is wonderful. I think it's a part of the human experience. But the goddess is our mother, you know, and I think people need to learn how to return to her embrace. We believe in a male god too, you know, we basically believe in a spiritual father and mother, but as I like to say, the world has enough D in it already, so we don't really need to talk about him very much. He's everywhere. Our god is just healed. He's a part of nature. He has a wife. He loves. You know, he's a part of the whole process. So he's just a healed, freed God. He's not a different God. He's a God healed by our connection to him. But she's been with us all along. She's never left, whether you refer to her as Mother Nature or Mary or Kuan Yin. She's still been on the earth. You know, it's just that we are returning her to Western civilization. And I think that Western civilization is in a great danger right now from its destructive courses.
And really the last question, because we talk only about many different things, but what about extraterrestrials in your form?
We don't have anything in witchcraft about that specifically. Some witches believe in them, some people don't, you know. I mean, I definitely believe that there's life out there. Do I know whether or not I believe they visit here? I don't know. I don't know. You know, sometimes I think they do and sometimes I think they don't. I definitely think there's something going on to whether it's our government has vehicles that we don't know about, or AI has become autonomous already, and we've got all these different things going on. I will say, in Alexandrian witchcraft, our founder, Alex Sanders, he did channel aliens. It had nothing to do with Alexandrian witchcraft. It was just something he did with somebody later on, and I don't really know what he felt about it. But it has occurred where people connect with them psychically or feel like they connect with them psychically. I've seen things in the sky. To my knowledge, well, I had one experience. Well, I have two alien experiences. One was that I had a reincarnation experience. Now, full disclosure, I was 15 years old and I was on acid. So I don't know if it was real because I was on drugs, right? So I'm looking in this mirror and I'm seeing my past lives, and this guide is telling me that these are my past lives. And it was like the Michael Jackson video where it's changing different shapes. And then all of a sudden I was a praying mantis person, you know, and the voice said, "You're not supposed to go this far. You know, you weren't supposed to see this. This was you on another planet," you know, and then it stopped, you know. So was it real or was it just, I was on drugs, I don't know. And then the other one, I had an experience in nature once where I encountered something and I saw it and it looked like it was like cloaked, like the, you know, that movie with the Terminator thing. And I said, "I see you," and I was by myself and it was at dawn. I said, "I see you," and all I remember then is there was a really loud noise, and it was like there was like something fluttering, and I put my hands over my, like I had to do this makes me sound like a basket case, but this really happened. I don't know what it was, and closed my eyes, and I was just sort of like stunned a bit, and then it was over. I don't know if my mind was erased or I don't know what happened, but I was like, okay, it's time for me to leave. Something happened. I don't know if it was an alien, I don't know if it was a fairy, I don't know if it was something else, but I was completely not on anything because I'm not really into drugs. But when you're 15, you know, things happen at parties. So it's one of those things. So I have those two experiences, and I've seen like crafts and things like that, but I just don't really have my mind made up. I think in the universe, obviously there's other life. Has it come here? I don't know.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you and talk with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Were those last two stories too weird? I'm like, I was